Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Eben Hewitt. Eben's the Chief Information Officer of Hyatt Hotels Corporation, a nearly $6 billion revenue hospitality company. He's had that role for a little less than a year. During that time, Eben has driven IT to focus on what he refers to as the brilliant basics, including better reliability, scalability, and speed, while improving customer experience at the same time. Prior to his current role, Eben was the Chief Technology Officer of Sabre Hospitality, and before that was the Chief Technology Officer of Choice Hotels. He's also the author of the book Technology Strategy Patterns, Architecture as Strategy, published by O'Reilly Media in 2018. I look forward to learning more about his journey as a business and thought leader through this interview. Eben, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
It's great to speak with you, Peter. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. I've been looking forward to this.
You too.
Well, Eben, you are the Chief Information Officer of Hyatt, and I think most people who are listening or watching this interview will be familiar with Hyatt as past guests of the hotel, for example. But I wonder if you could just take a quick moment and fill in some odds and ends as to the business you're in.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Thank you, Peter. So Hyatt is in the hospitality business. We've been in this business for about 60 years. And, in my view, it's the greatest hotel company in the world. We have about 1,300 hotels that are in dozens of countries, and we're growing a lot. We've led the industry in organic growth, in fact, for the sixth consecutive year. We're undergoing an asset-light transformation, so there's some real estate we're offloading, and that's been helpful in our growth. We have hundreds of properties that have joined our system just in the last 5 years. The last 5 years has been a lot of growth for us. We got Apple Leisure Group last year. We acquired in 2021, actually. And that's been successfully integrated into our business. That's about 110 resorts that are in Mexico, the Caribbean, and like that. Those are all inclusive resorts. So we've got a lot of, like you said, iconic brands that people are familiar with. So we've got Park Hyatt, luxury brands like that, Grand Hyatt. The backbone of our business is probably Hyatt Regency, which is a lot of conferences, sales, and catering, group events kind of thing. The Hyatt Regency just down the street here at the Magnificent Mile has about 2,000 rooms. These are very large conference hotels, and we really excel at that group business, that conference business. And then we've got the all-inclusive resorts. So we also have, finally, we have Hyatt Place and Hyatt House. These are sort of select service hotels that cater more to road warriors and more in city centers kind of thing.
A very interesting point that you made about the organic growth and that you've led the industry for, did you say 6 consecutive years? Is it?
That's right. Yeah.
That's really remarkable. May I ask, what are some of the reasons that you think you've been so successful relative to the competition on that front?
We have a culture that's really rooted in listening, Peter. It really is about empathy. And understanding what do guests need, what do guests want, and we really try to understand what people are looking for, not do technology for technology's sake, or not shove something down their throat that they're not looking for. We try and make it easy for the guests, easy for our customers, and make sure that we do that by understanding what they really want and need, not by what we want to give them. And so I think that listening has resulted in doing things that are really impactful and meaningful to people. Second, we have an agile kind of culture, an experimentation kind of culture, and I don't mean Scrum Agile. I mean, we're very clear on what are the ways we can experiment that will help us to test and learn in the real world in a quick way, and then we're able to kill stuff if it doesn't work out. If it doesn't make sense to us, then we shut it down. And so listening and empathy, and then marrying that with that agile kind of experimentation, I think is a lot of it.
That's a great overview. I really appreciate that. What a fascinating a combination of things. And I understand through your explanation how they work together very powerfully. You are the Chief Information Officer of the company, as I mentioned. Take a moment, if you would, to provide a bit of an overview as to your purview, if you don't mind.
So I have been here since last year, and broadly at Hyatt, I view technology as an enabler of care. I think that our job in technology is, it's not about quantum dust. It's not about, this shiny new thing. We are talking about ChatGPT, like everybody, to sort of figure out where does this fit. But we're not going to do that without that kind of listening and experimentation that I talked about earlier. So for us, it really is about me and my role, the CIO role to me is about taking that care that I think Hyatt is world class at and scaling that when we're growing so fast. How do we take that human element and make sure that we're taking care of our guests and our customers and the hoteliers that want to sign up with us to have technology that makes it easier for them to do the thing that they're trying to do. Technology should become invisible in some sense, and so for the guest, that means that they need more seamless solutions. We do this in a way like with digital compendium. This is something where you can just get a QR code and you get everything at your fingertips that the hotel has to offer. We do this with things like Hotspot. So if you go to the Hyatt Regency Orlando and then you log into the Wi-Fi and you go up to the Hyatt Place in Chicago Loop, it puts you on the Wi-Fi. And it kind of feels magic. Like you don't have to do anything. So everything we can do to take those roadblocks out of the way of our guests and our colleagues and our customers, that's kind of at the super high level how I view my job. But more practically, I have several hundred colleagues in my organization, and that's divided up under several leaders that report to me. So first is our CTO. And he heads up enterprise architecture, networking, DevOps, platform operations, data centers, and engineering, that kind of thing. It's a little different view of the CTO role. And the second, there's our CISO. And our Chief Information Security Officer runs, cybersecurity includes vulnerability management, threat intelligence, fraud investigation, compliance, risk management, and then security operations and engineering. Third, I have an SVP of field technology. So this is all the technology that runs in the hotels, the property management system that lets you check in and check out, that kind of thing. It includes the Wi-Fi and the TV and the phones. Then I also have an engineering organization that runs the central reservation system, our distribution system. It's kind of the heart of our business in some ways. Then I've got a leader for enterprise applications that includes all the back office stuff that runs legal, HR, finance, all of those, financials and stuff. And then I've got a great chief of staff who helps keep everything moving. And she really focuses on ensuring the success of the overarching initiatives that I have. The things that might otherwise fall between the cracks with these leaders, Peter. So if you think of security versus, the enterprise applications versus TVs in the hotels, those three people might not talk to each other all the time. But there's stuff that I need to happen that cuts across all of those things. So those things are the kind of capabilities like incident management or problem management or vendor management or product management, like those kind of things. And I can't just put that on any one leader, but I need to see them happen. We got an operating model. How does work come into my organization, and then how do we govern it? What's our set of roadmaps, and then how do we make sure that it's informed by those capabilities? That's kind of the role of that chief of staff for me. In terms of the operating model and those capabilities and bringing all that together, for me, I'm focused right now on what you might call the brilliant basics. How do we have better reliability? How do we have better scalability and speed? How do we have better customer service and transparency? This happens a lot where you hear people say, well, I don't know where all the money and time is going. I thought it was going to cost $1 million and take 6 months, and I find out it's $3 million in 2 years. Like, what happened? Why is that always going on with IT? I try and be a good steward. This is millions of dollars of somebody else's money, and I want to make sure that we're drawing a straight line to the things that we're doing, to the things that will help a colleague or guest or a customer of ours.
That's great. I was really fascinated by your description of the brilliant basics And you mentioned better reliability, scalability, speed, better customer experience, greater degrees of transparency. What are some of the ways in which you achieve that? In your little less than a year now in role, what kinds of activities have you undertaken in order to foster some of what you described there?
We got to ask ourselves, are we ever going to do this again in life? And if so, let's make a template and let's write it down, and communicate that to others and just sort of reuse that. So I try and templatize things to the extent that we can. There's a lot of stuff that we just do over and over. Second, automate everything we can. There's people that go into the Amazon web console and click buttons. That's an anti-pattern. You can't do that. Let's like put it into code, because code you can put in the repository, you could version it, and you can roll it back, and you can like treat it as a first-class citizen. So, that's important. Next, I really try and be explicit about the process. One of the, everything's kind of double-edged sword. One of the other aspects of being at a company like Hyatt that is so nurturing of people and so caring and so kind and thoughtful. I mean, it's really a great place to work. It means that everybody's really nice. And so it's tricky sometimes to think people don't want to say no. And they also have deep relationships. They can just say, look, I'll just call my buddy Susie and, she'll hook me up, and can't you just deploy this thing? And on the one hand, that's great. And I don't want to blow that up, to be sure. On the other hand, I need people to have the repeatable process and automate it as much as possible. And one of the things I'm really trying to root out is the hero culture that creates. When you've got post-COVID, really nice company where people stay a long time, deep relationships because everybody's nice, then it's like, oh, Peter can be the guy for that thing and I'll be the guy for this thing. And then we don't know what each other's doing. And so that's the next part of my approach, is to say, how can we make this explicit and give it away? I was a Java developer for a long time, and people would say, I'm the one that knows how to deploy the website, and I'm not going to tell anybody else how to do it, because then they can never fire me. And I was like, that is the dumbest strategy I ever heard. And it's like, why don't you just be great at what you do, and then they won't want to fire you, and they'll just put you in charge of more stuff. The people that espouse that point of view are doing basically the exact same job 15, 17 years later. True story. And the ones that don't think that's the way to be, the ones that think, the second I learn something, let me give it away. Let me share it. Let me write it down and put it on the wiki. Let me put it in LogicGate. Let me put it somewhere and tell somebody about it so they can do it too. There's a data aspect to this too, because culturally it's a mindset, Peter. I always try and push to make sure that it's not just, these are the metrics we had laying around because it looks like data and we had a bar chart and here's a pie chart. And so now you know the state of things. That's your executive dashboard. Those are dangerous because it looks real. It looks meaningful just because someone's showing it to you. It looks like data. It looks meaningful. But it's not particularly interesting. What tells you what really is going on in terms of the health of your business and being able to handle the brilliant basics is mean time to recovery. We will have failures. We know there's going to be failures. When the thing breaks, is it Keystone Cops and everyone just dialing for dollars to get their buddy on the phone and say, what do you think's happening? Let's scratch our heads and look at root cause. Or are you saying, no, we know how to get this back up because it's automated. And we know that there's a quarterback on the call who is going to run it. And she may not have the most important title on the call, but it's a practice that she knows how to do to run the incident call. And then the first order of business is stop the patient bleeding, like get the patient breathing again. And then we'll figure out root cause. Let's not delete all the log data so that we can do a good root cause analysis. And then we have a meeting every time. And the person knows to schedule it and when to schedule it. And they hold the meeting and they run through the list of what happened here and do that in a blameless way. That's what I'm talking about, Peter, when I say brilliant basics. It's like, just let's get really good at that. Michael Jordan would go in and practice layups hours a day, practicing layups. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's a great overview. I appreciate that. I know from our past conversations, as we've discussed the strategy that you're implementing, one of the key aspects of that is replacement of the central reservation system, which, needless to say, is a pretty important strategic system. Revenue is connected to it. How have you gone about the process of developing the plan to do so? given the importance of that system?
If you think about a central reservation system in a hotel, this is what does all of the availability, rates, and inventory. So if you see a price on Expedia or on Booking.com or on the global distribution system or American Express Travel, any of the places where you can book travel, that data, that price, and that availability came from a CRS. Knowing the data and where it flows, what are all those arrows, and making sure that we're spending the time to do the research to know that if we pull this out here, or we turn this off here, what the downstream impact is, that we still have the data flowing where it needs to go. That understanding those data flows is number one. Number two is the human use cases. That how do people actually use this system? Not how do we think we use it, but what really is the set of use cases that people rely on. That will mean that we're able to understand the implications of our choices. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a little bit of a different approach. I know some companies, somebody's pounding their fist saying we need this by December 31st because they think some magical thing happens. And what we need to be able to do, in my mind, is measure twice and cut once. I'm going to very thoughtfully plan this, making sure that it's as long as people feel heard and listened to, and that they're included in part of that long discovery process of measure twice and cut once, create a blueprint. I don't want any hands on keyboard before I got a pretty good picture that we can poke at, because we all know it's much cheaper to find those concerns earlier on. Get people on your team that have been there, done that, and they can kind of anticipate some of the risks, some of the things that will go wrong. Like I was introduced to this idea of the pre-mortem. Look, we have a big project in front of us. Here's some people that are stakeholders in it that have some knowledge of what's going on. Let's do an exercise for a little while to imagine the kinds of things that we think could go wrong based on our experience or our reading or having been there before. A lot of times technical people tend to just look at the tools. Well, the problem is you didn't buy me, Datadog for Christmas, so I can't do anything. That's not good enough. We need to look across people and process and technology, and then imagine what are the bad things that could befall us across all those categories. We need to be numerate and understand the data flows and have a clear plan, and we need to talk about nuts and bolts.
Very interesting. Another thing you've spoken about is the need to develop better communications, noting that the need to improve the signal to noise ratio as an organization like yours works with your colleagues across your organization. What are some of the methods that have been best at doing that from your perspective?
So every day, one of the things I think about is how do we improve our signal to noise ratio? How do we communicate effectively, set clear expectations? And if a problem presents itself, we can just react to that and solve that once, and then context switch and wait for that problem to crop up again. Or we can look at it and say, what category is this problem in? And can I just kind of solve for the whole category? Sometimes that's not harder, or too much harder anyway. There's a lot of data in the system, and so some of it's noise. It's not meaningful. It doesn't contribute to a pattern or an understanding or an explanation. And the signal is that stuff that is meaningful and real, locked up in that data that tells you the story. There's this great there's social scientist in the 1960s named Melvin Conway, and he had this observation that came to be known as Conway's Law. And it's this: organizations that design systems are constrained to design systems that reflect the communication structures of those organizations. Basically, that's a big, long sentence. And what it means is your architecture will look like your organization is structured. Your software will talk to each other the way that the humans in your organization talk to each other. If you got a silo here, you're going to have a silo architecture. If you got a monolith here, you're going to have a monolith here. It's a bunch of boxes and arrows that looks like your org chart. What that means is that designing an organization using some of the properties that we would as architects use to design a great system, what are those properties? We want it to be scalable. We want it to be available. We want it to be resilient. We want it to be secure and safe. We want it to be highly performant. We want it to have some observability and manageability. So if you think about those properties when you're designing your org chart, uh, that helps all of the communication. That helps everybody to understand the shortest route to get their thing done. It makes sure that people are able to know with confidence that I've sent this message, that message has been received, and now the thing will happen. If you go into a restaurant and order the tacos, your interface is the menu, and the waiter handles it, and you don't need to get back in the kitchen. You get your tacos. I've seen a lot of organizations that kind of don't present a good API to the world because they don't want to be order takers. Well, we're a service organization, and it's not being an order taker. If we said to finance, we got to close the books because SOX controls. You can collaborate with people, even if you're a service organization, and that's a matter of communicating to the broader powers that be. Where is the place that you can make the most impact in being upfront in the conversation, so that the broad contours of the work that will get done in the next year is influenced by you? That's the strategy part. Yeah, some of the work on the ground might then look like an order taker. Here's a ticket, or I need this system, or we got to add this feature, make all the buttons blue. But it won't feel like order taking, and it won't actually be that, because we're in the business to serve people. That's what we're doing.
I know that you've also had a focus in developing a pipeline to universities. Talk a bit about those partnerships and the value you've derived from them.
I'm thinking about how do I encourage my leaders to think bigger. One of the ways I try and do that is creating that strong relationship with universities. Like I was happy to be a guest lecturer at DePaul here in downtown Chicago. We're at the Harvard Graduate School Extension, where they teach my book called Technology Strategy Patterns. Happy to be working with students from Morehouse in Atlanta. So one of the things we did is to kind of keep this fresh thinking and a pipeline of new talent and build a resilient organization. Is we hosted a hackathon for Black technology students. So this was great, because Morehouse, of course, is a historically Black college university, and the winning team is going to show, like, here's this thing we made, and for me, I'm just going to be tickled to see their work, but more importantly, to meet them and understand how they think and introduce them to Hyatt. So what's wonderful about it, and that's honestly one of the best parts of my job in my mind, Peter.
Well, Eben, yours is an industry that went through its toughest time ever during the early portion of the pandemic, and one of the industries among all that was hit most consequentially. I realize there was a difficult time for your company, though the early part of the pandemic obviously predates your time with the organization. You've been focused more on rebuilding that organization. I wonder if you can reflect a little bit on those trials, and also the methods you've used in rebuilding the organization since your arrival.
COVID hurt this industry really, really badly, and a lot of hospitality companies are still recovering in some way. It's been a great year. We've actually had a record year at Hyatt. It's been our best year ever, which is fantastic. But some people who were, they were good people. They were smart people. They had a lot of institutional knowledge. They said, I don't know when this industry's coming back, a couple of years ago. And we lost a lot of folks. And when revenue went to nothing and occupancy went to nothing, then a lot of people got laid off. And so how I can rebuild this organization and make the organization itself as resilient as the systems are, if you will, it's kind of a reflection of Conway's Law, I guess, there. That's another front of mind thing for me. I think it's important to care for the people, and they will care for the customers.
Yeah. Very interesting. You've also talked about the necessity to drive what you call human-centered technology. And there are a variety of ways already in our conversation that you've highlighted the necessity to think about, to be empathetic, great listeners, contemplate and drive better customer experience. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about the how in terms of developing a human-centered technology.
Yeah, wow, that's great. Because there are things that we're doing that are, try to be human-centered. But, so I mentioned Hotspot, where you can seamlessly connect to the internet, in a lot of our hotels. We have another one called Magic Link, So this is an example of what you're talking about with the human-centered design. If people are presented a problem, IT people tend to want to solve that problem. But if we only do that, then we're just reactive. And if we're just reactive, then we become passive. That can tamper creativity. It can tamper proactivity. The magic link is a great kind of answer to this reactive thing I'm talking about. So if you say, well, we have a ton of tickets that are about password resets, and we got to hire more people to handle that. We can do that. Let's get really hardcore about the password structure we require so that no one can brute force and guess the passwords. These are all just accepting the problem as given and then responding to the problem only. What I think is cool about the Magic Link project is that it just says, what does the world look like if we didn't have that problem? If we took passwords out of the picture, what would the world look like? What other good things would have to be true if we didn't have any of these problems? What we did then is you don't have to log in. There isn't a password. Every time you just get a new link sent to your email and you click it and that's yours. It just takes a whole ton of stuff off the table that we have to maintain and manage and hire for and deal with. It takes a whole bunch of cognitive load out of the system. It's easier for our guests and our colleagues. And it's a way of looking at problems that says, have we really thought about what the actual necessity is here, what the rock hard foundation truth is? Because a lot of times we haven't. If you ask anyone on the street, did you have a childhood? They wouldn't even know what you were talking about. They'd say, well, yeah, every human in the history of Earth has had a childhood. In fact, that's not true. Jean-Jacques Rousseau invented the modern idea of childhood in his book called Émile in 1762. Before that, there were no childhoods. And I say that because it's, in my mind, similar to we used to know for certain that the Earth was flat. And we used to know for certain that the sun revolved around the Earth. It's not the stuff you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's the stuff you know for certain that just ain't so. And that gets attributed to Mark Twain. It was actually somebody else. But those really are the kind of ways of approaching our work that then say, if you marry that with empathy, listening, human-centered design, not starting with the technology, but instead thinking, I've got a human being in front of me. What do they want? What is she trying to do? What's in her way? How can I help this person? And forget about the technology completely. Then what you're doing is you now shifted from an output-oriented mindset to an outcome-oriented mindset. This is very important to us here at Hyatt. I talk about this in the Technology Strategy Patterns book too. We're doing this every day in different ways. One thing is we say, okay, if I type up a Word document for you or an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint and send that to you, I've done the work. A document might be an output, but it's not an outcome. An outcome is specifically a change in human behavior. You don't have to remember your password or make a password or fit the password rules or no passwords. You're going to click this link and it's going to seamlessly take you there. That's being human-centered. That's not being technology-centered. This stuff is supposed to exist to help us, and sometimes that gets turned around, and we get in service of it if we start with the technology.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Well, I must say this is the first time that Rousseau and Emile have been mentioned in an interview, and in some ways befitting somebody who has both a Bachelor of Fine Arts and an MA in literary theory. How did somebody with a background such as that educationally find their way into technology, and to what extent has that been a secret weapon of yours, perhaps?
Well, that's a fun question. Yeah, I used to get early in my career, I got asked this a lot. You don't have a computer science degree or a tech background. How did you get to do this job? But what I did learn in graduate school is a few things. Number one, I learned. It sounds like a cliche. I learned how to learn. I knew how to read massive volumes of dense, hard things and see the important pattern and figure it out quickly, and then figure out how to apply it and get a perspective on it. That turns out to be very similar to what like a consultant needs to do. If you're a Bain, McKinsey, BCG, this kind of consultant, massive volume of data, quickly get a smart perspective on it that's informed. That's a skill that everybody could use. And so that helped me. But I learned how to be a Linux administrator, how to be a database administrator, be a web programmer, be a Java developer. I did all those jobs. I started out on the help desk. I started out just answering phone calls about how to reset your password and why is the thing down. Knowing the pain, the life experience, knowing what people need to know and how much they need to learn and how much they need to constantly relearn as it kind of moved up from the help desk to programming, database, and architecture and in leadership. I think it helps me keep it real with people. I can talk to them and they know that, I know what PS minus AUX does on the Linux command line. They can talk to me in real terms. And so one of the things that I've talked about in a different book, the semantic software design book, it's this idea of what is the semantic real estate? What is the set of signs that work together? There's a thing called a hotel. What is that? We might think we know, but then there's Airbnb. And is that a hotel or no, that's different? Is it a resort? Is it all inclusive? Is that the same? Where do we draw these lines? And how do we think of how we talk about our structures? Because that's what gets written into a design document, that gets written into code, that becomes a deployable artifact. And if you do that wrong, you've got a management nightmare on your hand, or you've got a bunch of stuff that goes down together with things that it shouldn't go down, or you have to deploy 2 terabytes of stuff when maybe you only changed 10K of stuff. So thinking about things in terms of the semantics made me a much better designer. And it made me quickly be able to talk about these terms with architects and say, this is how we're going to design software. Here's my kooky theory, Peter. We're living under a false metaphor. In 1968, there was a conference in Germany where really clever people got together and said, look, we need to talk about the state of computing. What's happening here? They were looking for a way to think about their industry. They were looking for a way to think about their product. From this one conference, really smart, really accomplished people say it's like a factory and it's like a building, and that means architecture. Those 3 words then became the way that we thought about our field. We thought there was a factory. And so we're going to create a factory to recreate this component. The problem with that is obvious. The problem with the metaphor of architecture is that we don't have commodity stuff like steel and glass and concrete, and we don't have a known clear end of the system. Your building envelope, your real estate, the deed that you own. It's semantics. It's all words that get attached as labels to concepts, and those concepts become software. My assertion is lose the architecture metaphor, lose the factory metaphor. We're not making widgets. We need to embrace this semantic idea. The semiotics of software is the way to be successful at designing it. If you do that with a human focus, a human-centric view, and think of the technology second to serve it, you'll do amazing.
That's a great place to close it out, Eben. I really appreciate a very thought-provoking and thoughtful conversation throughout this. Greatly appreciate you taking time with me, sharing perspectives about your tenure as Chief Information Officer of Hyatt, but some of your broader philosophy beyond that. It's been a great conversation.
Peter, thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and great to see you again.